Well, we'll get started now, and I want to welcome everybody to Broadview Live, the March edition, which is very exciting because it means we survived January and February, which is great, and spring is on the way. And I'm very excited by that. I am not a winter person. I am just not a winter person. But I am delighted to welcome everybody from across the country to this edition of Broadview Live, where we're going to be having some important conversations upon how the impact of the climate crisis is being experienced in people's lives. And I want to begin by acknowledging the traditional territories on which we sit. And I will start with the acknowledgement from where I am in Hamilton, Ontario, and that we acknowledge that we gather today on the lands occupied by the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe nations at the time of the creation of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. We honor and respect these nations and commit ourselves to walk together gently upon this land. So please, in the chat, feel free to uh, place where you are, the territory that you are currently residing, and so we can acknowledge the richness and the diversity of that across the country. So again, my name's Christopher White, and we have two wonderful guests here tonight. The first is Amber Vigh, and Amber is a mother of three who lives on 100 Mile House in British Columbia. Her son Carter tragically lost his life on July 11th, 2003, because of an asthma attack exacerbated by wildfire smoke. With the help of the BC Lung Foundation, we have started Carter's Project, an initiative to bring air quality monitors to towns across BC that don't have adequate monitoring systems and to educate the public on asthma and air quality. Amber, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Our other
Yes,
guest,
thanks for having me.
no, our pleasure. So our other guest was going to be Zipporah Berman. But Zipporah, sadly, is sick tonight. She's been in return from Iceland. And I don't know about the rest of you, but this has been a brutal winter where we are here in Southern Ontario for illness. And I'm just recovering from one myself. And so our sympathies and empathy go out to uh, Zipporah as she recovers. So with Zipporah sick, what do? You call the doctor. So we called a doctor who was featured in the same article as Amber on the health effects of wildfires, and that's Dr. Bethany Ricker, who's a family doctor based in Nanaimo, BC. She is co-chair of the British Columbia Regional Committee of the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment, which is CAPE, and a board member of the Nanaimo Climate Action Hub. She has a special interest in maternity care and outreach medicine. She is an outdoors enthusiast with a love for skiing, hiking, and cycling. So as we begin our conversation, when we put this out, the question that we put out, we asked you how you were experiencing the climate crisis and the wildfire seasons in the communities in which you are living. And if you could put some of those in the chats right now as we begin our conversation, that would be terrific. And I will and Christina will look at um, sharing some of those as we go throughout our broadcast today, because it is certainly something that I think all of us are sharing right now and experiencing. So Amber, I'm going to start with you, and thank you so much for being part of our conversation tonight and acknowledging that part of this is a very difficult personal conversation for you. So thank you for being willing to come on our program and to share that story. So I guess where I want to start is if you can tell us what happened with you and with Carter.
Yep. On well, to start, Carter had asthma his entire life. So it was nothing out of the norm for us to be cautious about what was going on with air quality and just what was going on around us. On the day that Carter passed, he came to summer camp with me. I was running the summer camp at our local rec center. And Carter was super excited because that day we were planning to go to the water park and have a picnic lunch. So before we left to walk the kids down to the park, we checked the air quality on our cell phone, not knowing that that information was coming from 100 kilometers away in either direction. I had no idea at the time that that wasn't real time information to us. Um, so when we checked the air quality and it looked like it was safe, we couldn't smell smoke, you couldn't see smoke. So we got all the kids ready and we took our walk up to the park. And while we were there, we had a great time. He didn't need his puffer. He just we played soccer. We had went in the water park, had a picnic lunch, and he was super happy to be there. Um, Probably around noon, the smoke started to come in. And at that point, I knew that I couldn't have him walk back to camp with the smoke up the hill. So I had one of the other instructors come and pick him up and also pick up all the kids' backpacks. So they just were walking by themselves. They didn't have to carry anything. And when we got back to the arena, he was so excited. And he's like, Mom, guess what? And I was like, What, buddy? And he's like, I heard on the radio it's free Slurpee day. We have to go for Slurpees. And I was like, Okay, yeah, we'll go. How about we go after dinner as a family? And unfortunately, we never made it to get Slurpees that day. Um, After, for the rest of the day at camp, we stayed inside just because it was smoky out and I knew I didn't want the kids out there. So we played games inside like we normally would and had a great rest of our day. After camp, we stopped at the grocery store, talked to some friends, picked my husband up from work, and went home. And Carter's brother and sister had been home that day and they had built him some, I don't know, house or some big thing in Roblox, the video game the kids all play. And so he was so excited to get home and see what they had done for him in his game. And the kids were on the couch watching or doing their game stuff. And my husband was sitting there with them, and I was getting dinner ready. And all of a sudden, I heard Carter starting to cough. And so we gave him his puffer, like we always did. Um, and gave him a drink of water, and it progressively got worse and he kept coughing and kept coughing, and we ended up giving him his puffer a couple of times. um, and then it kind of seemed like it was subsiding a bit, and then it started again. So he had two puffers of the blue puffer, the Ventolin, and an orange one, which is a steroid, which we were supposed to give him if he was having a lot of issues with his asthma. um, we gave him the orange one. And when he started to kind of calm down, it was normal for us to put him like in a cool bath because during an asthma attack, he would get so worked up and he'd be so hot, and that would make it so much worse. So I ran a bath for him and I was sitting there beside the tub talking to him, and he started to cough again like crazy. We gave him his puffer again, and I just knew that I needed to get him to the hospital. And I told my husband, like, we've got to get him to the hospital. So he picked Carter up and carried him out to the truck. And on the way out, Carter said to his dad, I don't like the feeling of this. And I phoned 911 as soon as I got into the truck. And I knew because we lived in like 3 miles outside of 100 Mile at that time. And the week prior, my daughter had a just random issue. An ambulance had to come to our house, and it took them 12 minutes. And I knew that Carter didn't have 12 minutes to sit there and cough, and I knew I could get him to the hospital faster. So I called 911 and talked to them the whole way there. We were there in less than 5 minutes. The ambulance paramedics were waiting outside the hospital for him, and they grabbed him and took him inside right away. And they, like, everybody in the hospital was working on him. We had, when it got to the point that they were giving him CPR, there was a lineup of paramedics and nurses and doctors. We had doctors on Zoom from Kelowna and Kamloops. Um, they're like, everybody was there helping and trying so hard to help. And I remember just sitting there, like we sat at the foot or stood at the foot of the bed, so we're out of the way, but we watched, my husband and I watched it all happen. And I remember just thinking, like, this isn't our story. You're going to be okay, buddy. Your ribs are going to be really sore, but it's okay because we're going to be here to help you. And when the doctor told us that we needed to come out of the room so he could talk to us, it was just like someone punched me right in the chest. Like, the we talk about it all the time. The fact that we had to leave the hospital that night without our baby was like the worst possible thing. I never expected him this to happen. Like, he had had asthma attacks before. We had been to the hospital to get his oxygen levels brought up. It I never in a million years did I think that this was what was going to happen and that we were going to leave and our baby was going to be gone.
And how old was Carter?
Carter was 9.
So he was 9.
Yeah.
And what impact did the wildfire smoke have in terms of triggering what turned out to be a fatal asthma attack?
They, the doctors and stuff basically said that over the course of the summer, I guess, because there had been so many smoky days, what had happened was it was just like a buildup and a buildup and a buildup. And it was just that at that moment, it was too much. And his little lungs just couldn't take it anymore.
So this was cumulative because of the ongoing fire season that was happening
Yeah.
where you
His
were.
cause of death was asthma exacerbated by wildfire smoke.
Wow. as the uh, as the father of a now grown adult child who had quite significant asthma and who has had to take his child to hospital. I can certainly have that part of the feeling, but I can't imagine. I don't think any of us can what that would have been like for you. You've taken this and made a response. And can you talk to us about what you're doing in response to what happened to your son?
Yeah, so a few days after Carter passed, Chris Lamb from the BC Lung Foundation reached out to me in the beginning just to extend his condolences and um, just to, like, not that it's his fault in any way, but just to say, like, I'm sorry that there wasn't adequate air quality monitoring in your town. Like, this isn't okay. This, we need to fix this. So together we started Carter's Project. The first town we went to was 100 Mile, and we brought 10 outdoor monitors and I think 90 indoor monitors. So with Carter's Project, our goal is to go to every town across BC and bring in air quality monitors so that every single person in BC at any given time, no matter where you are, you can go onto a website and you can say, okay, this is where I am. What is the accurate real time air quality monitoring for exactly where I am? Um, so we started with 100 Mile House. We did a town hall meeting where we gave out all of the indoor air quality monitors for people to have in their homes. Um, and we put up the outdoor ones. And we also taught everyone how to make do it yourself air purifiers out of a box fan, a HEPA filter, and duct tape. So all of this is fully subsidized by Carter's Project. And we, this past summer, we went to Dawson Creek and to Gold River on Vancouver Island. And we also put an air quality monitor in Sayward on Vancouver Island. Um, and then summer coming up, we're going to Lillooet and the Okanagan area.
Mhm.
Um, so our goal is to get I would love to see Carter's project go across Canada, go across the world. I would love to be able to make sure that everyone has that accurate real-time air quality monitoring, because it's something that is so needed now with like essentially we have a wildfire season. It's not just, oh, maybe this summer we'll have a wildfire, like they've started calling it wildfire season. So it's something that is so needed, because nobody should be left in the dark. Nobody should have that inaccurate information. You should be able to protect yourselves and your families. And that's our goal with Carter's project. Um, and this year, we're also starting Carter's Camp. So it's an asthma camp for kids aged 8 to 10. They already do an asthma camp in with the BC Lung Foundation in Vancouver. They do two a year. So with Carter's camp, it's going to be a traveling camp, and we're going to do the first one in 100 Mile. There's room for 10 children, and it's all fully subsidized again. And there is $1,000 in reimbursement, or whatever you want to call it, that will bring help to bring the kids to 100 Mile. So this way, kids from up north, it's easier for them to get to 100 Mile than it is for them to go all the way to Vancouver. And it's just going to give them a few days to hang out with other kids that have asthma, learn a whole bunch of information about asthma, have fun, and just get to be kids and be in a safe environment. Um, I had never heard of the asthma camp and until after Carter passed. And they actually were just around the time that he passed, there was an asthma camp. So I think it's something that will be so important. And my hope is that with the information that we're taking out there, we can empower these kids to take care of themselves, to truly understand their asthma. Like Carter, he always had his puffer. He was also allergic to peanuts, so he always had his EpiPen. So he
Mhm.
carried around what we called his brief kit, and it was like a little lunch bag, and wherever Carter was, his brief kit was. And he always made sure to tell people, I have asthma and I'm allergic to peanuts, and my stuff is in here. And I know how to use it, but if I need help, this is where it is. And his friends all knew, like, he was his best, he was his own best advocate. He wasn't ashamed at all. And I think that the asthma camp can help those kids. If there are kids that are a little bit afraid, it can help them, to empower them and to feel like I am a normal child. I just have this thing that sometimes restricts me from doing all the normal kid things, but I can still do as much as I everybody else can, kind of thing.
Okay, well, thank you. And this is a tremendous tribute to your son through an incredibly difficult time for you and your family. And I just want to thank you for the work that you're doing to honor him, but also to improve the lives of others. It's a courageous act. So thank you. Um,
Thanks.
you're very welcome. Before we bring Bethany in, um, Christina, are there any comments in the chat in terms of how people are being impacted by fire season? Because that's kind of where we are right now, which is an annual fire season across the country.
Yes, we have one guest who has been living with drought and water rationing every summer. She says, we live surrounded by trees. We are increasingly fearful. The 2017 wildfires in BC brought back my own asthma, which has continued to be easily triggered by poor air quality. We also have people who are, or we have one audience member who had talked about a wildfire this past summer where a lot of the northern communities were evacuated for a long time, and some were sent as far away as Niagara Falls. She says it makes looking at spring scary. We lost businesses and homes in our area, and the fire came pretty close to town. Betty has told us that a story very close to my heart, as I have a daughter now in her 50s who has had asthma since she was a child. A few years ago, she had to come to the coast because of the intense smoke in the interior of BC. She knew she had to leave. Her life the past several years has been affected by the smoke. She cannot live life normally outside during these times.
Okay,
Those are just some of the comments that we
great.
have.
Thank you, Christina. And I can say for myself, this past summer, um, we have a family cottage south of Bancroft, Ontario, and we had more fires than we have ever had before, closer to us. And for the first time, the lake was used by water bombers to put out the forest fires. And this year in the Hamilton area wasn't so bad, but the year before was terrible. So when we bought our furnace, had to replace our furnace. The furnace guy said, "Fire season is now a regular event, and I really recommend you get a filter, an air filter to attach." And we did, and it's made a big difference. But I think this is part of the reality of the climate crisis is we now have a fire season. And I'd now like to bring in Dr. Bethany Ricker as a family doc and somebody who's also very involved in the environment. And Bethany, first of all, how do you respond to Amber's story as a physician? What are your thoughts there?
Thank you so much for sharing your story, Amber. As Christopher said, I don't think any of us can imagine what it is like to go through that kind of loss, and to carry on and take everything you've been through and your grief and put it to such action is such a tremendously beautiful outcome, or I shouldn't say outcome, but a beautiful effort and a beautiful way of honoring Carter. And when I teach resident doctors who are training to be family physicians, when I talk to them about planetary health and environmental health, I talk to them about Carter and about you. Having never, interacted with you before, I talk to them about you and your son and this horrible outcome, this life lost so unnecessarily because of climate change, and about also the all of the steps that you are taking and that people need to take, to protect themselves and their communities, from these kind of wildfires. Um, I think your story is such a demonstration of how unfair it is that we can do everything that is in our power that we know we need to do to protect ourselves from the effects of climate change on our health, and yet it can still be not enough. Like, you did everything right, Amber. You knew everything that needed to be done. Carter knew everything that needed to be done. As you said, he was his own best advocate. You checked the air quality. You were spent the afternoon in a safe, clean air space inside the arena, knowing that the kids shouldn't be outside. He had his medications on him. He used them. All of these things we can do, and yet this is such a demonstration that climate change is something that needs to be addressed at every level of decision making and policy. All of the advocacy that Carter's Foundation does is phenomenal to get these air quality monitors in every community, to teach people to make home HEPA filters, to educate people with asthma about the effects of wildfires. All of these are important steps. And additionally, all of us, our entire, country, all of our communities, we need to be advocating for our government to not invest in further fossil fuel projects, to invest in clean energy projects. We need to be saying, these are the ways that climate change is affecting our health, our community's health, our patients' health, from the healthcare perspective. And we know there's a cost to this. These deaths are not random. These medical conditions are not random. They are preventable. We can prevent them by making decisions that help curb climate change. And we need to, because climate change is the greatest threat to our health of our century. There are so many ways that, of course, climate change, but even more specifically, wildfires impact people's health. Of course, respiratory issues are a major one, but it's not even just respiratory issues. There are links to lung cancer and other types of cancers, heart disease, dementia, preterm birth, low birth weight. And it's people who are the most vulnerable who are the first and most likely to experience these negative health outcomes. It's pregnant people, it's newborns, it's people with already lung conditions like asthma and other lung conditions. It's people who already have heart disease. And it's also people who are most vulnerable, not just most vulnerable in their health status, but most vulnerable geographically and most vulnerable with their means, right? It's people who don't have a space, like Christopher mentioned, putting in an air filter when he was what were you replacing a
Ernest.
furnace in your house. Yeah, there you are. And some people who might be renters or who might not have the financial means to make these kinds of decisions or replace a furnace or add an air filter, or who just might not have the knowledge of how to make a home air filter like Amber teaches people. These people are much more vulnerable without having the financial means to outfit their house or to go to a community space with clean air.
So what in your practice and on BC, what are you seeing in terms of the impact of the climate crisis on the island?
Yeah, it's of course becoming much more visible and prevalent, the impacts of the climate crisis on our health. I saw multiple people put in the chat some of the ways that you all have seen and experienced the impacts of the climate crisis on your own health, including those poor air quality days. I myself, the ways that I see it show up, I do have parents who come into clinic not infrequently and say, I'm worried about my kids' health. What should I do? Should I let them play outside? How do I know if they should play outside? How do I know if it's safe? And it's heartbreaking to see parents have to make these kinds of decisions. And first of all, to have access to adequate information, as Amber is advocating for, to have those air quality monitors in every town. But also, it's heartbreaking to have to make a decision between letting your kid play outside, which we know is beneficial for their health, to play, to spend time in nature, to be creative, to have to decide between that and the potential risk of having them outside in a poor air quality day. And I have people come in who have experienced the mental health challenges of the climate crisis. People who have been evacuated from their homes or who've had a fire very close to their home, who are scared of this happening, and it impacts their day-to-day mental health and their day-to-day functioning. I the closest to home experience that I can recall in recent history was this past summer. There was a large fire at Mount Underwood on Vancouver Island, and a couple of situations um, came out of that. I have a friend who is a critical care nurse who was working in Port Alberni, quite close to the fire at the time. And she told me that in the operating room, it smelled smoky and they had to close down the operating room and couldn't do surgeries for that day or multiple days, which is think of how long, first of all, people have been waiting for some of these surgeries, but think of emergency surgeries, emergency C-sections, a person with a infected appendix that needs to have it taken out urgently. The closest place for them to have that would be here in Nanaimo, where I am, an hour drive away. And there are some people coming to that hospital from already an hour or more travel from more remote communities. And now that operating room is closed down because of smoke in it. That fire also closed the road between the remote community of Bamfield and any other city or healthcare center for more than 2 months. So that's a largely indigenous populated community of Bamfield who would have had to take a many hour, very treacherous, potholed, flat tire inducing drive to get to the nearest healthcare center. They wouldn't have any access to healthcare, to a hospital for those 2 months. So there are a multitude of ways that the climate crisis is seen every summer, every season, here in my local community and of course across BC as well.
And yet, and yet, we seem to be living in a time in Canada where fossil fuels and pipelines are top of the pops, so to speak. And um, I'd be interested in terms of, does this surprise you? Do you, as a healthcare advocate, what is your response to the changing tides uh, of how we are viewing the climate crisis and public policy, especially with the federal government right now, and even in BC with liquid natural gas. So, what are your thoughts on that?
it is enormously disappointing. I think some of the decisions being made are very short-sighted, not taking into consideration the long-term lasting effects of burning fossil fuels and of climate change. We're thinking about extraction and production right now in the here and now, and we're not thinking about all of these negative outcomes on people's health and the expense on our healthcare system and on so many other areas of our life that are going to be more expensive and are already due to climate change. I think we need to be putting those investments into clean, renewable energy and into planning long term for the future instead of putting money and investments into projects, as you say, Christopher, such as producing and exporting LNG, liquefied natural gas, especially in BC, as you've said, which is a fossil fuel, which will continue to drive climate change. That's not a good long-term solution for us. And in fact, speaking of LNG specifically in BC, not only is it a fossil fuel, which will continue to perpetuate the negative health outcomes of climate change, but the extraction and the production and the shipping of LNG itself is extremely harmful to the communities that are nearby to these activities. And that's why CAPE, the organization that I volunteer with, has been strongly advocating for a health impacts assessment of the fracking and natural gas industry because we don't even have complete information about all of the toxic chemicals that are being used, the air pollution that is being produced, and the health impacts of those things on the communities that are nearby to sites where natural, supposedly natural, quote unquote natural gas is being extracted and shipped from.
So the what you just described, these are extreme impacts that we are experiencing right now. But this is not what makes the news, right? This is not what is front and center. So how do we, in your view, what your thoughts are about how we shift the conversation this way? Because frankly, the concerns you're raising, which are concerns I certainly share, are being drowned out in the, well, Bethany, that's all very nice, but we need jobs. We have a resource that we need to get to market, and these are people's jobs. So, the economy has to come first right now. We live in a very dangerous world with the United States to the south of us. So, Bethany, why are you trying to stop us from creating economic wealth?
It's important to keep in mind that more people are worried about the climate disaster than we might think. Our concerns do seem to be drowned out in the media and in the forefront of the government's mind, but the majority of Canadians are worried about climate change and want their government to act on climate change. It's just, as you say, being overridden in the media and in the government's priorities by other priorities. It's also important to remember that this is all interconnected, right? The worse our health outcomes from climate change, the higher the burden on our healthcare system economically. So we're not doing ourselves any favors economically by doubling down on fossil fuels, worsening climate change, and worsening the health impacts. So I think it's important for people, all of us who experience climate change and especially the health impacts of climate change firsthand, to be speaking up, to be talking to our neighbors, to be talking to our government decision makers, to be talking to our representatives in provincial and federal government and reminding them that we do care about this. We are thinking about this. This is not in the back of our minds. We need to be writing to our decision makers, calling them, and gathering with other people to share our experiences and make it known that climate change is harming our health, it is harming our communities, and it is something that we still care about. In particular, having a focus on the impacts on health is really important because people tend to care about their health. People tend to want to make changes that are going to protect themselves, ourselves, and our health long term. So if we can know what those health impacts are and report on them and talk about them, that can be a good agent for change.
Well, I think we're in a huge challenge right now in terms of that, in terms of getting that message out. I will say, although Zipporah Berman isn't here tonight, I interviewed her for an article in Broadview, and I was so impacted by this. This is a true story. I was so impacted by what she said. Is I sold my car and bought an EV because I just couldn't. After listening to everything she had told me about how the fossil fuel companies are operating to make sure that these sorts of conversations don't make it into the public square, I just couldn't anymore. Neither my wife nor I could. So we traded our car in and now drive an EV, and I drive by the gas stations. I'd like to bring Amber back into this conversation right now. Amber, one of the things that I'd like to hear from you is how do we as a community and as communities need to respond at this moment? Um, you are doing wonderful work in terms of responding to your experience. What is your wisdom and thoughts about communities who are all of us who are now experiencing fire season and the sort of work that we should be doing right now?
I think that um, we need to understand that just because the fire isn't at your doorstep doesn't mean that it's not going to affect your health. You could have a fire that's burning hundreds of kilometers away from your home, and that invisible smoke is bringing fine particulates into the air that you're breathing in, and that is going to affect you. We have to I understand that there is um, a way that the forests need to be mitigated. Things need to burn. Like there's a process in life that needs to happen as surrounding fires. But when I was a kid, it was like out of the norm. Like you'd maybe drive from Vancouver up to 100 Mile or something, and if you saw a fire on the highway, like around Lytton or Lillooet, or no, near Lytton, you were like, holy, that is crazy. And now my kids have grown up with fires every single year of their life. And we need to realize that you're the only person that can keep you safe. So if it's smoky outside and if even for a split second you think maybe I shouldn't go out for a run because it's smoky, oh, but never mind, I'm going to do it. You like actually think to yourself, why are you putting your body through that? Um I think we've become very complacent in the sense of it's just a forest fire. And because we all think of it as a fire season, it's not summer anymore, it's fire season. So we've become complacent into to think that this is actually dangerous for us. You're not going to go and sit behind a vehicle and just breathe in the exhaust. You would never, that wouldn't even cross your mind. But it's not crossing people's minds as to how dangerous it is to take the whole family for a hike up the mountain when you can't see 3 feet in front of you because it's so smoky. I think we need to actually look at what's going on and realize how much the smoke in the air is affecting our bodies, affecting our kids, affecting our animals. I have so many friends that have horses now that have asthma because you
Horses
can't
with asthma?
yeah, you can't bring a horse in the house to keep it protected, but they're out there in the smoke. And there's so many people that are still riding them in the smoke. Like, my daughter doesn't ride her horse when it's smoky out. But we're really just think it's the norm now, which is really sad. Um, I like even our soccer association here, it's a big deal. Like, Carter loved soccer. And I made a point after he passed to make sure that people are understanding the air quality. If it's a super smoky day, like, you guys need to shut that soccer practice down. Yes, maybe you paid for X amount of days to play soccer, but what I wouldn't give to have my son back to go and play soccer, given he didn't pass because he was playing soccer. Like, it wasn't anything to do with soccer exactly, but um there's so many things that we think, okay, we need to get our value out of this sport or this activity we've decided to put our kids into it. But think about what you could be risking. Like, I would give anything to be able to watch my son play soccer, but I never get to do that again. And I just hope that people start to take all of this so much more serious and really start to take a look around. Of course, when it's 27, 30 degrees outside, you want to be out on the boat, out on the lake, enjoying yourself. You don't want to be sitting in an air conditioned house doing nothing. But unfortunately, there are days that we need to make that choice and say, okay, maybe we'll stay inside, play board games, play cards, watch a movie, and like in a couple days, maybe it's going to be nicer out, and then we can go out and do those activities. You can still do things as a family, but you have to be cautious, and you have to, like, be realistic in what you're doing to your body.
And I don't think, Amber, that that's being communicated to us. One of the things that has stuck out for me in the interview that makes perfect sense, but that I did not think of, was when you talked about the cumulative impact on Carter's lungs. That
Hmm.
this was not just a one time, but there was a cumulative impact, which means this has and he was just a little boy and his little lungs couldn't take it. But that means that there is a cumulative exposure to everyone who experiences fire season, even if you don't see the smoke, which is true for everyone. When I was flying back this summer from Calgary, I flew across Manitoba into Northern Ontario. It was a solid, it was apocalyptic. It was just smoke, right? It was just smoke all the way back. And this obviously is having impacts on our health. But this is something, as you've said, we need to be continually raising. Could you talk to me a bit about how you can make your own air filter for your home? Because I hadn't heard that before, and I'm interested in that.
Yeah, so we work with Dr. Anne Marie Ward. She's with the Breathe Project, I believe it's called, out of UBC, maybe. And you basically just get like a box fan. And on the front of it, you take duct tape and you tape around. So you create like a shroud. So when the air is coming through the back, it's going through the filter and it's just going through the center of the fan. And you put the HEPA filter, tape it to the back, make sure there's no gaps. And it's super simple. If you go onto the BC Lung Foundation website and go find Carter's project, I believe there's information on it in there. And also, you'd be able to find the Breathe project in there. Um, yeah, it's super simple. Like, I think costs around, depending on how much your box fan is, maybe $50 to $60 for all of the stuff. And then as you notice that the fan is, or the filter is getting dirty, you can just take the duct tape off, put a new filter on, and it's super simple and inexpensive, um, and great for bedrooms. So one thing we've discovered is that people think if you build these air filter or air purifiers, and we say to them, where are you going to put this? I'm going to put it in my living room because I spend most of my time in my living room. When in reality, you spend most of the time in your bedroom sleeping, and the bedroom is obviously the best place to have the air filter, um, or the air purifier. Oh, there, Christina put the resource on there.
That's great because I was just going to ask her to, because so everybody watching this can access it.
um, but it's only good for a smaller space. So if you have like a massive living room, you're either going to want to make a bigger one, which there are ways you can make bigger ones, or you would have multiple in your room. But we have them in all of our bedrooms. And I think it's just something that, like, when we've gone to quite a few schools and built the air purifiers with the schools, and all of the classrooms have them. And the kids think it's the greatest thing because we have stickers and they can decorate them all. And in 100 Mile at our elementary school, we had the grade sevens build them, and then they took them and gave them out to each class. And at Horse Lake Elementary, it was the grade sixes and sevens, and they did the same thing. When we were on the island in Gold River, we made enough for the elementary school and the high school. And I think there was a couple extras that maybe went to one of the band offices or something. Um, but yeah, it's a super easy task to complete. And that's something that Carter's Project brings along with us to every town that we go to. And just to make sure that we're coming there with information. So everyone that comes to the town hall meeting, they're leaving with this mass amount of information, all of these resources, but they're also leaving with their indoor air quality monitor and their air purifier and the knowledge, the experience, all of it, just so that we can help people to keep themselves safe. I should have brought an indoor air quality monitor with me in here, but I don't have one in my bedroom. Um, we chose these air quality monitors with a digital display, and they have some colors and stuff. And the reason we chose those ones is so that kids would be more inclined to look at it. If it was just like the outdoor air quality monitors, you need to look on your phone, you need to go to the Purple Air website, search up your area, and then find the monitor on there. But the indoor ones, like a kid could come in, my kids do it often. If someone's burning something in the kitchen, they'll be like, oh, mom, the air quality is so bad right now. And it's something that's easy, and it appeals to them. And that's what we want, because we want to empower them to take care of themselves, to pay attention to what's going on around them, to pay attention to the air that you're breathing, and want to breathe clean air. So we tried to make it so that it was something that was exciting for them. Because what kid isn't like, oh, cool, a little digital display thing? Like, what is this? Oh, look, it tells me the temperature of the house, the humidity, like it tells you all kinds of stuff. But most importantly, and really big, it tells you what your air quality is in your house.
Wonderful. Um, if people have questions, if they could put them in the chat, questions for either Amber or Bethany. And Bethany, I want to bring you back for a moment. And I want to talk to you about the mental, ask questions about the mental health impacts, which we did talk about earlier. One of the things that I found that I can speak about personally last summer was it was so hot here in Southern Ontario. It was so hot you could only really go out for about 20 minutes to a half hour before you had to go back inside, and then cool down, go back outside. And I found myself like I was angry. I was resentful. We'd just gotten through winter, and now summer's being taken away. And summer's short in this country, even though it is extending, and we know there's a long, cold winter coming. So how are these changes impacting the mental health of folks that you're dealing with?
It's impacting people in all stages of life. In particular, young people, of course, are very worried. There's the term that's coined eco-anxiety, where we have anxiety about what the world is like and is going to be like going forward, and how that is impacting our health, but also our communities, our activities that we're able to do. And young people in particular are worried about what their future is going to hold. And to be clear, that's a normal stress response. That's a normal response to a real thing that's going on around you, to climate change. That's not a disorder. That's not anxiety as a disorder. And people at all stages are being affected. As I said, people who have experienced having to evacuate their community, they worry, they relive those thoughts, those worries, those feelings. There's also people who have had their lives so impacted in the sense of having a home destroyed, such as with flooding or with a wildfire, or people who have even lost livelihoods from their farm flooding, or their business not being able to open. Those are major impacts that people deal with the consequences of, especially the stressors on their mental health if they're not able to support themselves and their families, and if they're worrying that that's going to happen again. So definitely, it's very prevalent in our clinics when we see people and discuss their mental health concerns. The impacts of climate change are showing up in those discussions about people's mental health.
Yeah, I find it so interesting that, there's that old analogy, right? Like the frog in the kettle. And I just feel like we're the frogs in the kettle and it just keeps getting cranked up and I'm like, "Oh, this was very nice. Now it's oh, this is a little uncomfortable. Now it's getting, and that's sort of where we are. Christina, any questions or comments from folks in our conversations for today?
I have a couple questions. The first one is for Amber. How do we find out if there are air pollution monitors in our community? And I think you just went over that, but maybe you can give our guests a refresh on what site to go to or where they can go for the specific information.
Yeah, if you go to the Purple Air website, I'll show you what mine looks like in just a second here. Um, you can just Google Purple Air and it will give you the ability to search like your area. So this is, I don't know if you guys can see that. This is what it
Yep.
looks like right now at my house. Like that's my house. That is our air quality right now, which is 15. So it's on a scale from 0 all the way to 300 plus. Obviously, each level is a little bit worse. So at 15 right now, we're good. Um, but you'll see in like some of the places, either when there's forest fires or if you look through the map and you go to like say places in Ontario that are very very heavy populated and you can see that that one air quality monitor is right next to a major highway, that air quality is going to be absolutely terrible. And that's not because of a forest fire or anything, it's just because the pollution is so bad in that area. So they go by like the fine particulates, the PM 2.5 that's in the air. And that's how what it reads by and how many of those particulates are there and, you know, all that science stuff. But yeah, if you go to the Purple Air website, you'll be able to see everywhere. There's some, they're in the States, they're all across the world, but there's not enough.
Thank you. Next question, Christina.
Our next question, I guess, is for both, or maybe Dr. Bethany Ricker would know this. Is anyone working on developing an alternative source of income for people who depend on fossil fuel income?
I think that's a question a little bit outside of my purview, just as specifically as a family doctor, and I'm not sure if Amber has anything to comment on that. I think the short answer is yes, many people are working on this. This is a huge topic of conversation amongst policymakers, but that's a little bit outside of specifically what I can speak to in my experience as a family doctor.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Those are the only questions I have, Chris.
Okay, any other comments that you wanted to share?
No, there are quite a few comments that of people who are not looking forward to the summer anymore because of wildfires.
I mean,
And
I personally can understand that. I go into like right now in BC, we haven't had nearly enough snow. Our snowpack is so low, and there's people that are super excited about that, and all I can think of is our wildfires are going to be so bad. Like we need the moisture. Um and I feel like every year I'm thinking more and more about what do I need to have prepared? Like we have animals and um I always think about Carter's things. Like do I pack everything up so I'm ready to go if I need to go? We personally have never had to be evacuated, but I know that a lot of my friends have, and that's what they're thinking too. In the summertime, they're do we have all of our stuff ready at the door if we need to leave? It's a scary thing. It's scary how quickly it can go from nothing to something huge, can go from a fire so far away from you to the wind shifting and it be on your door and you have to leave right now. Um, I think at the end of the day, we can't live in fear as much as it would be easy to just stay home and live in fear. We can't because the world is crazy, but it's beautiful and there's so many things that we need to go out and do. Um, but it's just about being prepared and knowing that you have a plan, knowing that as a family you have a plan. It's like when I was a kid, you had a plan to get out of the house if there was a house fire. You grabbed your cat or whatever that was sleeping right beside you and you rushed out to this part of the yard where everyone met. It's the same kind of thing come summertime when you're worried about wildfires, is just making sure that you're prepared. If you're traveling, you have water in your vehicle, you have all those things, you have your medications. um, because if we just sit in fear, it's not, what kind of a life are we living? And I think about that all the time with Carter. If I just, people say to me all the time, I don't know how you're doing this. Like
Mm.
you lost your kid. How can you do this? I still have two other kids that I'm here to live for. And if I just sat here and cried all day, every day, he would be so mad at me. He would want me to go and do things. Like I tried yesterday to climb those 48 flights of stairs and I did not make it very far, but let me tell you, my kids went all the way to the top. Daxton did it in 9 minutes and 30 seconds, and Cadence did it in like 13 minutes. And all of that was because the whole time they were going up there, they were doing it for their brother and they were thinking about him the whole time. And we could have just not gone because we could have been like, no way, I'm way too scared to do that. But what an experience. So I think you just have to still live your life, but just be prepared for whatever could happen.
I think that's where we'll stop. But I just want to, and I'm sure I'm speaking for everybody here, that we are have been both moved and inspired by what you have shared with us tonight, and are very grateful for the time that you have shared as part of our national podcast. And please keep in touch with Broadview. We want to continue. We will continue to follow the climate crisis story. And to Dr. Bethany Ricker, Bethany, thank you so much for coming in at the literally the just about the last screaming minute. And what I really appreciated in what you said was how articulate you were in terms of defining the crisis, but also then defining how we can react and act um, in the political context in which we find ourselves right now. And it's never been more important. And Amber and Bethany, you've been wonderful guests, and just thank you so very much. To all of you here, oh, you're very welcome. To all of you here, This is a production of Broadview Magazine. Broadview Live comes from Broadview Magazine, which is a registered charity, and we encourage you to donate to it. Broadview is a independent magazine that is not corporatized. This broadcast was not brought to you by a commercial sponsor. It was brought to you by you, those of you who subscribe to our magazine and to donate for that. So I want to say thank you to all those who have been part of this tonight and who make it happen. And we ask for your continued support as we move on. Next, next time, I also just want to say a quick shout out to Christina and a thank you for the work that you do in this broadcast. And that's all for tonight, and we will see you in April. And blessings to everybody as we're in Lent and heading into the Easter season. And again, Amber and Bethany, thank you both so very, very much. It's been a wonderful evening.